Hi, and welcome to Ask SCW here on SCW, the wrestling channel here on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. Please subscribe right now. Leave any comments in the comments section, please. Like and share the video as well. Answering your questions once again in the wrestling community. If you want to get involved here on Ask SCW, drop a comment here in the comments section, or you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Everything is coming up on your screen right about now. And all you got to do is leave the hashtag AskSCW. Your question will be featured in the next video, and I'll give you a shout out as well. Just before I start the video today, just to know what's coming up in the channel over this next week, we've got predictions for WWE Extreme Rules, which will be coming out hopefully on Tuesday after Raw, and we've got, of course, Slammiversary as well, which should be dropping around Wednesday for you this week, so plenty of things to keep up to date for you. With those pay-per-views being next weekend, I'm still hoping to do the Q&A for the Sunday, but there is a small chance that I may do it on the Monday instead after the pay-per-views to give people to talk about the fallout of those shows, not necessarily the build going into them. But also, just before we start this week, I want to give a shout out. One of my good friends, James, who sometimes is here with us on Ask SCW or SCW in general, is doing his own podcast at the minute this week in Metropolis. I will drop a link in the description talking about all different topics coming out throughout the world. And in fact, this past week was talking about WWE for a few minutes as well. It's a great show, really good to listen to. I recommend checking it out. It's on Spotify, Anchor, all the good, great podcasting platforms. I'll leave a link in the description where you can find it on Spotify, so go and check that out. Without further ado, that's the intro finished. Let's get into our questions this week, and we're going to start off. Don't call it a comeback. Dylan Ketchum is here with a question for us. He's back on Ask SCW. What do you think of Keith Lee becoming double champion? Great question to kick us off. And I'll tell you what, to be brutally honest, it was a no-lose situation in my opinion. Keith Lee, Adam Cole, one of them was walking away with 2 championships. If it had been Adam Cole that was the winner, Keith Lee for me would have no longer been in the mid-card. He would have been able to, he would be released. He could either go and get revenge for the NXT championship, almost like where they both kind of switched belts after a while, or would have been a situation where Keith Lee was released for the main roster. WWE has gone this route, and I think it's slightly the better route, though, of the two, and I'll explain why. Adam Cole is now free to do what he wants. Does the Undisputed Era now go to Raw or SmackDown? There's a big question mark there of what will be in their future. A bit of me just wonders what there's left to accomplish for these guys on Wednesday nights, but certainly as well, maybe it's a waste to call them up right now during the pandemic and no fans. Maybe it would be a great way to introduce them when fans are allowed back in the arenas. But talking about Keith Lee, who is the double champion, he is now the face of NXT, and what better way? I've screamed from the rooftops now, almost since episode 1 of Ask SCW, of how he should be pushed to the moon, how this guy should be a main eventer and should be treated like one. He now is the main event of NXT. He has both championships, which is something no one's ever done. We've had double champions before, but never the NXT and North American championships, and that's obviously the 2 big singles championships. And now, obviously, Keith Lee, he goes what looks to be a probable program with Karrion Kross, which for me has money written all over it. 2 guys that I believe could actually, if were built correctly, could actually be built to headline a major WWE pay-per-view, not just NXT. So from this, I think Keith Lee is definitely the way forward. Whatever happens from this point onwards, Keith Lee now has a legacy stamp in NXT for what he's done. He's a double champion. He should be the face of whatever brand he's representing, and right now that's NXT. So I'm very pleased to see him as the double champion. And I thought the match was good. I was ashamed the spoiler was coming out, but I did manage to avoid it, thankfully, so that didn't hamper any of the enjoyment for the match for me. But no, very happy with it, and it's good to see Keith Lee as a double champion in NXT, and long may that continue. Keeping things Keith Lee, our next question comes from Orange Cassidy's Thumb. Interesting. Should Keith Lee make an Owens-like appearance on the main roster to take down a big figure as NXT champ? Which show would you have him cameo on, and who should he beat? Great question, this one. And my answer to this is an immediate why not? I think it'd be a great way to rubber stamp NXT as a dominant brand as usual. We've had the brand-to-brand invitational going on, which has been quietly dropped, to be fair, over the last month or so. But Nikki Cross, ironically, was on Raw this past week, unannounced. No punishment, no reprimand for doing so. So why couldn't Keith Lee just turn up for one show and help establish that brand further? And I mean, the thing for me is, if you're going to call someone up from NXT, it always has to mean something. It has to be a big deal. I'm not a fan when people just come in and fill just, the quota. They're not really doing anything special. I mean, I love the way that they called up Matt Riddle. I mean, he came up, he beat AJ Styles, the Intercontinental Champion. He was made a really big deal of. The whole roster at the time was watching from ringside. It really felt special and a big deal. And I think that that's a sort of kind of impact you need to make if someone's going to come up. So for me, Keith Lee, you need to put him in a money-making scenario. Now, I would have him. Ideally, if he was coming up full-time, I'd have him on SmackDown. I think he's better suited against the likes of Strowman, The Fiend, maybe as well, like Roman Reigns when he comes back as well would be an amazing match to watch. But if you look at things at the moment, I would love to see the money match. Not a championship match, but the money match, which is Brock Lesnar. Now, you couldn't necessarily come in and have a squash match on Raw. That would be wrong to do. But like Kevin Owens, when he came up, like you suggested there, he took out Cena and it built up a pay-per-view match at the Elimination Chamber back in 2015 and led to a couple of pay-per-view program matches. I think that that would be a great way to do that, for Keith Lee to come in, almost challenge Brock Lesnar there and then, leads to a pay-per-view. And what way to be so dominant for an NXT superstar to beat the beast incarnate Brock Lesnar? It would send shockwaves through. It would make an immediate statement, and it would show the dominant force that Keith Lee is and why he should be a main eventer for years to come within the company. It might as well mean something if Keith Lee was to come up as a one-off appearance or as a full-time appearance. But for me, that would be the best way for him to ever debut on the main roster, whether it was a cameo appearance or whether it was a full-time appearance. Keith Lee is the man of the moment this week. Austin Whitley with the next question. I know you and I both have been pretty high on Keith Lee for months. Do you see him going to Raw or SmackDown by Royal Rumble time? Great question. To continue on there, we said how would probably be the best way to debut him in a cameo scenario or full-time scenario. I do wonder, though, as we said also earlier in the video, about perhaps this feud now that could start with Karrion Kross, if that is actually going to mean that Keith Lee's time as NXT champion may actually be short-lived. You've got a great way here for him to drop the North American Championship. Karrion Kross can cost him in the match, can lead away to where they get to the next takeover. And Karrion Kross, for me, is someone that cannot be losing too soon. I think it's too soon to put him in the championship picture, personally, but he would be the perfect guy to defeat Keith Lee for those championships, and it would release an opportunity later in the year when that match takes place for Keith Lee to come to the main roster. I think time is now, and Keith Lee should come up in the near future. I'm not sure if he will, but I would love to see it. He was in the Royal Rumble last year. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the Royal Rumble next year. But as I said as well, I do think that these call-ups need to happen when we have fans back. So I think Royal Rumble time would be a perfect time to do it. But I do think for both Keith Lee and Karrion Kross, who are both seemingly going to be the NXT Championship program going forward, I can see both of them up on arguably Raw or SmackDown within the next 12 months. It's certainly by WrestleMania time, because I think that it feels to me that Karrion is being fast-tracked personally through NXT at the moment, like we've seen with the likes of Nakamura and Bobby Roode in the past. And I can see this being the same case for him at this particular point. Keith Lee, I do think, yes, I would like to see that happen. But then if you were to say, like, as we've already discussed in these few short minutes, the Undisputed Era, Karrion Kross, Keith Lee, all to be potentials that could go up to Raw or SmackDown, you look at it and say, well, then it would leave a big hole in NXT. And if someone was to stay, as much as I would be in favour of Keith Lee being the one to make the move of everybody, I could see them keeping Keith Lee in NXT and carrying that brand, because he is someone that can carry a brand on his shoulders for a long, lengthy time. So I'm unsure whether he will or won't in the next 12 months. But what I will say to you is that both you and I are big and high on this guy. I actually really think that it would be awesome if he was to. I'd love to see him on a main event program, preferably on SmackDown. That would be the best place I think it would be for him. Next question now is coming from Dan the Man Williams, and he asks, what's your honest opinion on cinematic matches? The only ones I like are Stadium Stampede and the Boneyard match. I personally hate it, and they completely make wrestling lose the sports element of it, and I don't want to see any more now, and hopefully none when the crowds are back. Well, a very honest appraisal there from Dan there on cinematic matches. I have to be honest to say that I don't mind them, but what I would say is that they've taken certainly shape more during the pandemic time here in WWE, and with AEW doing it as well. But cinematic wrestling has been going on for a longer period. I mean, if we look at perhaps the furthest back I can remember, I would probably say the mid-90s in WCW, when we had the birth of the Dungeon of Doom. Certainly, if you go back to watch it now on the network, it's a bit dated, but certainly had a bit of a different eerie cinematic feel about it when they were in that Dungeon of Doom. You go forward a bit, there's been Lucha Underground, which I love the way they did their cinematic work. I mean, of course, a lot of that wasn't in-ring matches, but they certainly did a lot of their storytelling and storylines based on that. As well as that, you've got, of course, Matt Hardy with the Ultimate Deletion, Final Deletion, any deletion you want, really, in Impact Wrestling in 2016, and that really got a lot of people talking and buzzing about it again. It was sort of briefly brought into WWE with that program with Bray Wyatt, and then we had a House of Horrors match, which was disastrous. You look at it now in 2020, we're going through a pandemic, and I suppose WWE doesn't, and AEW as well, when you mention Stadium Stampede, they don't want to just focus on an empty ringside area the whole time. They want to have something that makes you think, right, okay, we've got something a bit different to look forward to in the show. Some have been hit. I mean, you mentioned the Stadium Stampede and the Boneyard match. Both have been masterpieces, in my opinion. I did enjoy the Firefly Funhouse as well when it happened with John Cena. But you have some misses in there as well, or ones that you kind of go, that wasn't quite as I expected, or was a bit different. But certainly, different can be good. A lot of things within wrestling can seem a bit repetitive in 2020. I mean, you look at the Money in the Bank ladder match, for example. It was different this year. It was sort of fun. You could turn around and say that maybe it's not something you want to see again, and I would agree with that. But certainly it broke things up for a year and made something a little bit different. As for going forward, I personally would turn around and say that I think when we start to get crowds back, I would say we'd start seeing less and less of these cinematic matches again, because you have a crowd that have paid good money to have a ticket and sit at ringside to watch a match. This is just while there are no fans there, and I think it's something that's designed for the short term and not for the long term. I mean, as for cinematic matches going forward, I mean, well, let's look at Extreme Rules. We could have perhaps 2, maybe 3 cinematic elements in it, and I think there is the good and the bad, and certainly the bad of, like you described there. The first thing I would have to say is eye for an eye match. That for me really makes me question my suspense of disbelief. How am I supposed to believe that an actual match is going to end with someone's eye actually being pulled out? It just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel right. It kills somebody. It's nonsense. So I'm not a fan of that concept. I think that that's absolutely ridiculous. I'm not really a fan of where that direction is going. Personally, if I'm being brutally honest. When you look at the swamp fight with Bray Wyatt and Braun, I'm actually quite excited for that. I kind of feel that there's a bit of a story behind it, storytelling. It's going back to the roots of the old Wyatt family from a few years ago. So I do kind of feel that from a cinematic point of view, that has something special that you could tell, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it could bring. We could see different elements of Bray's character. And I enjoyed the last, like I said, the Firefly Funhouse match we had with Bray Wyatt. So I think his character could be quite suited to cinematic. And that's another key thing. Certain superstars probably suit this gimmick more than others. You know, you've got someone like The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, kind of works. Undertaker kind of worked. But if you look at sort of regular superstars, when we've seen Gargano and Ciampa, it was kind of like a wrestling match in an empty warehouse and didn't really have so much of the cinematic kind of style to it. And I think that it kind of didn't feel as organic and as normal as it could have done had it been different superstars. They would have been better suited for me having a normal one-on-one match that went on for an hour in the ring, but that's just my personal opinion on that. But looking at one other match that could potentially have cinematic elements could be if there's the bar brawl with Jeff Hardy and Sheamus, a feud which really is now really starting to put a lot of question marks on it of why they're continually dangling alcohol in amongst a self-confessed alcoholic's face. It's really not in good taste. I kind of was okay with the hit and run idea, the fact that it was definitely meant to be someone else. Now I'm starting to feel that there really is a lot of poor taste in the storyline, and I'm looking forward to seeing it finish. I really hope that Jeff Hardy just wins the match and we can move on from this program, because I think that it's certainly going in a not so nice direction, and I'm not so keen on seeing it go further. But there certainly could be some cinematic elements to that match as well, and maybe that could be interesting to watch. We'll have to wait and see with that one. I'm sort of in the middle on the fence with that, which is more than what I can say for the actual match booking itself. I'm not such a fan on that. But to close it up in chapters for you, cinematic wrestling, I'm fine with it, but I think that it's been good to, during this pandemic era, to have something different and fresh to watch for a product, what could feel, what has naturally felt a stale product, and something that's kind of felt a bit empty, you could say, more ways than one. We've been doing all the shows in the Performance Centre, and for, of course, AEW just being in the empty dailies place. But when you look at the two companies, they've tried to throw something different out during this period. I'm happy to see something fresh, something different, but I think when fans come back, I do think we will see less of it. Next question coming from, I believe, a new asker here, Mark S. Thank you for asking a question here on Ask SCW. What do you think about a women's TV title that's defended across all the brands, but initially the holder can't be a Raw or SmackDown Women's Champ within the past 2 to 3 years? Very interesting concept of that question, and I do like it to a certain extent because of the fact that I do feel when you look at the undercard of the women's division, if they're not in the championship program, they're stuck in catering. They're not doing anything. I have said on the last couple of weeks and previous episodes here that I think that the women's tag team division could be utilised really well to help build some of these people, give them TV time, instead of having all these double champions. But at the same time, a TV title could work pretty well. My only negative towards this is that I look at it and say, well, I mean, we have so many championships in WWE as it is. Does this kind of almost feel that it's not going to feel so important, it's not going to get pay-per-view time, and it's not going to be treated with credibility? It took a long time for the women's tag team titles to really sort of mean a lot, really, in WWE. It kind of had that big opening push, and then it kind of disappeared for months when the Iconics were champions. We sort of had a bit of better run in the last sort of 3 to 4 months with those championship belts, but it would be interesting to see how they would book a mid-card championship. But I would be on board with it, but I'd tell you what would make it perhaps more on board for me. If they would have unified the Raw and women's champions, have an actual women's champion, like with the men's side, have an actual men's champion that can go across both brands as the champion, and then you could perhaps have a TV champion, someone in the mid-card who then can go across all brands as well as the mid-card champion, gives them TV time. And like you say, you keep away those main eventers from the area. Why do you need a Charlotte Flair there, Asuka, Bayley, Sasha? No. Let's keep that to the people like a Ruby Riott, a Liv Morgan, you know, someone in the mid card who's not had their chance. What about Dana Brooke? Not had their chance to really break through yet. It would do them wonders. And like you say, for NXT as well. And I've said this previously. If you can do it across all 3 brands, you get an NXT. TV champion in WWE, and they can experiment on Raw and SmackDown. What about Tegan Nox just winning the belt, getting a chance to show herself in front of a bigger audience? It will bring more eyes to NXT. And also, it would also prove whether she would do well at that time on the main roster or not. Would it be time to call her up, or if she loses the belt, do you just keep her in NXT? It's a very interesting concept. It's something that I am quite a fan of, but I would want to see less championships to see a mid-card title brought in. Next question is coming from the ego and maniac Derek Stark. What did you think of the Karaoke Showdown on SmackDown? And do you think we'll ever get an Evolution 2 all-women's pay-per-view? Well, I'll start with Evolution 2. I have seen some rumours going around it recently that there could be a network special coming the week after SummerSlam. But there is also potential that they could split SummerSlam into 2 shows as well this year. So it's unsure whether they actually will dive into an Evolution 2. I've seen conflicting reports saying that it can be and that it's not going to be happening. But I do think we'll get one at some stage. The question will be when. I would love to see it as a yearly part of the calendar. I think it'd be great for the ladies to have their own pay-per-view. It would help push this women's revolution forward, and yeah, I would be massively in fan of it. You've got a great roster there, and at the moment you are missing some of the big names, which would probably push some people's ideas to think that it wouldn't be the best time to do it, but you could do it and help raise and make some new names, get some new people in the main event. Maybe Bayley and Sasha have fallen out by this point. They could main event the show. You've got Asuka, you've got Io Shirai. You could utilise all 3 brands. Arguably, if you can get NXT UK involved as well, you've got 4 brands to play with. If you can get people on that show, it would be fantastic. It would be a great excuse to do something maybe like the Queen of the Ring. Maybe you can have some sort of concept like that. There's many different ways you could do an Evolution 2.0 and how you could make that show work. So I would be massively in favour of it. I would really like to see it. Time will tell if it will come. But I do think we'll get it at some point. The question will be if we would get it in 2020 or not. As for the Karaoke Showdown, where do I begin? Right. I am going to be sharing a little bit of me here. I have been working as a karaoke DJ, so I've heard the good and the bad over the years. So I'm kind of used to hearing some really great singers, and I'm used to hearing some really bad singers. And before you ask, no, I'm not singing on this video. But what I will turn around and say is that when I saw the segment, I kind of felt that with the pandemic and with everything that's been going on right now, they probably maybe want to do a segment where they've got kind of, you know, less wrestling going on at this point, especially when people may have tested positive for corona, but then they're still around each other, so I don't really see how that would make such a difference really. But you look at it and say to yourself that maybe this could have been something that could have brought a gimmick out. Maybe someone you didn't realise, maybe a Dana Brooke was a really good singer, and this would be a great way to bring her character forward, and we could get something out of it. So I kind of went in with an open mind thinking, well, it's not. Thank God it's not a bikini contest. I was thinking first off, because I mean that really pushes the women's division back. But I look at it and say that this really did harm the women's division as well, and I'm going to explain why. The whole competition was awful. No one could sing, so it didn't really elevate anyone that much in character. I thought the one that probably did the best of the bad situation was Dana Brooke, and I'm not saying that she was the best singer by any stretch, but you could see that she was 100% invested and trying to get herself over with the TV time that she had. And sometimes WWE, it feels like they want to do that with their talents, to put them in these awkward situations to see who comes out the best and making the most of bad situation. But the thing is, no one could sing, and it went on far too long. Then I thought to myself that maybe we were building towards something, a match, which we got. But then the match lasted less than 2 minutes and was thrown out for a DQ and was just a complete mess. I'm pretty sure Lacey Evans has turned heel in the process as well. But literally from the whole thing, it just was a disaster from start to finish. There was nothing to enjoy about this. That, if you thought yourself that you were going to listen to one or two bad singers, which when we got Lacey, when we got Dana, I kind of thought this is okay. We're going to get something good at this. But then the Tamina part was really weird. A lot of the song choices were random. And then the Naomi thing was awful. I think the other thing that's really bad about this is as well, if you look at it, is that with the men's division, if this was done for the men, this would be just purely seen as a bad segment. I mean, we're talking Bobby Lashley's sister's kind of bad segment, and it doesn't really do so much damage. It does with the women's division because of the fact that when you look at the women's division, there's only like 8 women in each roster on WWE programs. So they may have 24, 25 on TV every single week in some format. SmackDown only has like 8 in their division, and 4 of them were doing this awful karaoke segment. And you just think, well, that damages almost that whole division. No one came out with any credibility. It looked damaging. If you want to do a popularity contest, shouldn't you do it when you actually have an audience rather than a blatantly fixed thing from the start where you know your people in the PC are knowing who they're meant to cheer for? These things are done kind of fixed anyway, but it's just even worse when it's done where you know that people are not actually voting. The whole thing from top to bottom was a bad creative move. If this had been where it would help someone with a new gimmick, say, let's take Dana Brooke, for example, who's not gotten a lot of TV time, and she could sing, and it was going to be a thing going forward where she would be doing a bit of a singing gimmick, kind of like Gillian Hall back in the day, you would turn around and say, okay, do you know what, we got something out of this, but we got nothing out of it. It was a really painful, awful segment. It led to a match which was not benefiting to anyone either, and it just felt like a complete waste of time. And for me, that puts it down as got to be one of the worst segments of 2020. And for someone who's quite tolerant of karaoke, that's a shame for me to say, if I'm being brutally honest. Continuing on from what could have been one of the worst segments of 2020, this question comes in from Stewie Independe, which I believe is the first time asker. Thank you for your question and getting involved with Ask SCW. Do you think this week's episode of SmackDown was the worst ever? Well, I was going to go through and have a look through the archives and see if I could really find some really bad SmackDowns to put forward and say that this was worse or this was worse. But sometimes you have to go off memory with this sort of stuff, and I can't think of a SmackDown that was worse than this one. Now, granted, the main event with a New Day versus Cesaro and Shinsuke Nakamura, for me, was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with that main event. But if you look at everything when you put it together, we had 4 matches on SmackDown, and we had no proper finish. We had 2 roll-ups and 2 DQs. We had the karaoke segment, which we've just talked about in depth, which is very damaging to your women's division. We had no storyline advancements, really, with a lot of the first 3 matches. The last match, yes, I mean, New Day, Cesaro, Nakamura, we were aiming towards a tables match at Extreme Rules, it was for the tag titles, and that part I'm totally fine with. But if you look at the karaoke stuff, which I've just gone into, why that was damaging, we had a 14-15 minute recap of a match from Money in the Bank. We had Jeff Hardy versus The Miz, which, no disrespects, I have no interest in seeing in 2020. That's a match that was probably at its peak, probably around 2008, 2009. And we've probably seen it a number of times as well since Jeff Hardy returned back in 2017. So I didn't really see the need to see this again. Really, when we look elsewhere in there, for me, the women's match was okay, but it was just nothing special. And when you look at it, there's just no fans. It's the pandemic. It's literally the time of what we see right now with the PC. We've got times where we kind of have to be a bit more forgiving with wrestling because of the fact that they aren't able to perform in front of the thousands that are usually watching. They're having to perform either in front of nobody or in front of a few of the performance center trainees. And it's hard to do your best work in that sort of environment anyway. But it just felt like everything here didn't connect, didn't work. And this will be remembered as one of the worst SmackDowns ever, just purely because I can't really think of a high point on this show. Like I said, the main event was fine, but when I say it was fine, it was okay. It wasn't something that I'm going to remember this time in probably even 2 weeks from now, let alone 5, 6, 7 months from now. So it's certainly a SmackDown for me that is going to be very quick to be erased from memory. But it's such a shame as well because I felt that SmackDown at the start of the pandemic was almost one of the easiest shows to watch, but it feels like in recent weeks it's becoming one of the most difficult to watch, and it's a real shame with that. This week's SmackDown for me really was painful, and I would actually go on record at this point and say I don't think I've seen a worse one. There probably is one or two out there that are very close, but they had an audience, they had something going on. Maybe they had proper main eventers, which this show didn't either. I mean, where was your big people on the show? None of them were there to be seen. So for me personally, this one has to go down as one of the worst. If not, I'm going to go on record saying the worst currently in SmackDown history. Next question coming from Mike, Italian Habs Mike. With rumours of Tessa Blanchard very close to signing with WWE, do you think Tessa should start with NXT as it would be the best fit? And who should be her first program? To me, Tessa versus Io should be saved for down the road. Very good question, this one. And yeah, it does seem rumours suggesting Tessa Blanchard is more likely now to be signing with WWE. I had seen the rumour actually that if Evolution, which we talked about earlier in the video, wants to come into place, that would be a perfect place for her to debut. And I think that actually that would be a fantastic place for her to debut because all eyes would be on Tessa. But I do sort of agree with you. I mean, Raw and SmackDown, you can argue, we're missing Ronda Rousey, who's not been around now for a long time, so shouldn't really be counted, really. But we are missing Becky Lynch. We are missing Charlotte Flair. We are missing the two arguably biggest women in women's wrestling in WWE right now. Sasha Banks, Bayley, Asuka, all are carrying the load at the moment, and they're doing a good job as well. Io Shirai doing a great job in NXT. Where is the best place for Tessa? I mean, there's a lot of people on Raw that are not getting TV time that could do, so you could argue Tessa would be lost in the shuffle. SmackDown, the same, although I do think that whoever gets called up from NXT next will be better suited for SmackDown, that we'd get some fresh matchups. But I want to see NXT, for the reasons we've talked about in previous videos. Triple H, Shawn Michaels can put an arm around her, point her in the right direction. Even if she's only in NXT for a calendar year, I think that is the best place for her to start. I agree, she wouldn't put her straight in the championship match, but I would want to say she should be put in a meaningful program. Alright, perhaps someone like Tegan Nox would be quite nice to see because of the fact that she's currently going for the championship at the moment. But the big match that I think would be great to see from the starting point would be Rhea Ripley. I want Tessa in as a heel. I think she'd do quite well as a heel. Can be that cocky badass that she was when she started in Impact Wrestling. I think it suited her very, very well. And her versus Rhea, I think, would be an awesome match to watch. So for me, that would be the place I would actually start it from a booking perspective. Rhea Ripley seems lost since WrestleMania. I really don't know where, how, and why they've dropped the ball with her, really, because she was going on such a good run. Lost to Charlotte Flair, and to be fair, there's no harm in losing to Charlotte Flair, but it seems to be with certain superstars when they're building up at WrestleMania that they're built to a point for WrestleMania to be fed to Charlotte Flair, and of no fault of the superstars' own, including Charlotte Flair, the booking has nothing for these superstars after, and it's really weird because Rhea should have been, looking for revenge, redemption from minute go, and it just feels like that she's just gone to the sidelines. And she's now been in a weird program with Aaliyah and the Robert Stone brand. So for me, I'm really perplexed of what they've been doing with Rhea Ripley in the summer of this year. It feels like she's not having the best of 2020s, which is such a shame because the 2 previous years, her work was outstanding. I want to see that come back. And I think with a program with the likes of someone debuting like Tessa Blanchard, yes, putting Blanchard over, you could argue and say would be not the way you want to go for Rhea Ripley, but it would feel like a big program, and I think that would get Rhea back in wheels of motion. Tessa Blanchard could come in, she'd get a big win to start off with on a program that I think people would be invested in. I think Rhea Ripley would need a heel turn, and that could help put wheels in motion with that. And I do feel that with Tessa Blanchard, then that she can move on then up the ladder and go towards the championship, because like you say, it should be saved for a later date. Tessa Blanchard should be within NXT within at least 6 months before she was having that marquee match, because she's not long as the champion. She needs to establish herself as that main event top woman in NXT as the champion. And now she's got that first defense, but she should overcome Tegan Nox. We'll see where she goes after that. But I'm very interested to see what they're going to do in NXT when it comes to Tessa Blanchard, or Tessa Blanchard in general, if and when she's most likely to come now to WWE. Next questions come from Noob and Co. If Sasha Banks wins the Raw Women's title at Extreme Rules, will it hurt Asuka's push? Will Io Shirai show up on Raw to return the favour after Asuka saved Io last week? And which stipulations will we see at Extreme Rules next week? Well, to start off with then was Sasha Banks. If she was to win the Raw Women's Championship, they would have all the major championships on the main roster. I personally don't see it happening at this particular point. Spoiler alert, I think Asuka will retain. I mean, you could hurt the push a little bit, yeah, because, I mean, I feel that at the moment we're seeing a lot of Sasha and Bayley. So for me personally, I don't think that we need to see any more of it. You need to have as many people rising up the card as possible. Asuka is doing a good job at the moment. Sasha and Bayley are doing a good job within their own right, even if I do feel they're being overused at this particular moment. But at the same time, I would hate to see that. Yeah, I think it would harm Asuka if she was to lose the championship. You could argue and say, well, then the return match could come at SummerSlam. But at this point, or perhaps even a Raw or so afterwards, but I just feel that the program for me should be Sasha versus Bayley somewhere down the line. That's where Sasha needs to win the major championship. She's won the Raw title many times previously. She doesn't need it at this point. She needs to become the Grand Slam champion, and she needs to do it by defeating Bayley. So for me, I do think it would hurt Asuka, but at this moment, I don't feel it's going to happen. As for Io Shirai, well, we've got the Kabuki Warriors now that made the return this week, and we look like they're going to have a championship match on Raw next week. Could we get Io to come in and help them win the belts? It's certainly a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out. But what I would say is that I would be surprised at this point if Bayley and Sasha were to lose the championships now. I think the cracks will start at Extreme Rules, and I think that the belts will be lost not long after. I would be surprised if they drop the belts on Raw, purely because, as I've said previously, I don't think anyone needs to be a double champion in WWE. I don't think Asuka needs it either, as well as Bayley. It just, I mean, it puts them on more than one show, which is great, because with your bigger stars, you get to put them around on other shows. But I think that you need to utilise your undercard here, and you need a team to come in and try and establish a tag team division to this point. These are some of the biggest teams you've got in the women's tag team division that have been going for the belts recently, but they're already at the top of the card in the singles division. So for me personally, I expect Bayley and Sasha to retain, although I wouldn't be surprised if what you have questioned there could happen. But at this particular point, I'm going to say that I'm going to stick my neck out and say that I predict it doesn't happen, but I wouldn't be surprised either if it did. As for Extreme Rules, well, as we know, we have the Bray Swamp match, Swamp fight that we're going on with Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt. It looks like we've got a bar brawl with Jeff Hardy and Sheamus. We've definitely got the Eye for an Eye match, which is definitely have some cinematic viewing as well. Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins. Dolph Ziggler gets the biggest stipulation, whatever that will be, at Extreme Rules against Drew McIntyre. So that will have a stipulation match. And I think we're going to get a tag team table match, as I said earlier, with the New Day versus Cesaro and Shinsuke Nakamura. So there looks to be a number of gimmick matches here involved. It looks like the women's matches will probably be regular matches, I think, at this point. But we'll have to wait and see if any more stipulations are added closer to the pay-per-view. It certainly would be late in the day if we got any more stipulations thrown into matches. But I'm very intrigued to see what Dolph Ziggler's stipulation is going to be. He claims it's something we've never seen before. I do feel that Dolph would have gone for something that would have majorly favoured him, would have put Drew at a massive disadvantage, whether that had been a handicap match or some sorts. But he claims it's something we've never seen before. So whether it be handicap, like with 2-on-1 with Rude coming back, Rude as a special referee, a ladder match you think would suit Dolph. You know, it'd be interesting to see what they would do for this. But it's the horror show as well, so maybe we need something that's a bit gory, a bit bad. Who knows? Maybe a special type of steel cage match that we haven't seen before. Maybe in something that kind of way. It will be interesting to see what will happen. It's been a long time since we had a first blood match, but then at the same time, probably not something you want during the PG era at the moment. But like I say, I have no idea what that match is going to be if it's something we've never seen before. So we'll have to wait and see. But there looks to be a number of stipulation matches, and I'm looking forward to Extreme Rules. Even though there's going to be some good and bad on that show, certainly will be something different. And they've gone with a theme for this pay-per-view, so that's kind of interesting as well. So I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. Should be fun, hopefully. Last question this week, coming from our good friend Straight Edge Josh. What's the most disgusting tactic you've seen a promoter use to promote business? Fritz von Erich once dubbed his ill son Mike the Living Miracle after he suffered toxic shock syndrome. Yeah, not the best, is it, that one? I mean, I must admit, my knowledge of the Von Erichs is not so strong. The only real knowledge I have is when I was watching the Dark Side of the Ring not so long ago. In fact, it was the start of the pandemic, which actually kind of feels now years ago, if we're being brutally honest. It's 3 or 4 months ago, but it feels 3 or 4 years. But going back to this question, yeah, there's been some awful things that some promoters have done over the time, depending on what your stances were. A lot of it, some of it could even be current with the pandemic going on and wrestlers going to work and risking, their health at this particular point. It's not a great way to promote what's going on for their sakes. I mean, thankfully, also fans are not in the shows right now, but you look at it and with other things as well, like you say with the Von Erichs. I mean, it's not the only time they've done that with Mike there. I mean, they actually did. You could argue, Dave Meltzer said this and won one of his awards, actually, an exploitation of his death. A show was done as well. And I believe there was also a fake heart attack as well from one of the Von Erichs as well to promote one of their shows. So, I mean, some things have been done in bad taste. The one that's really left the worst taste in my mouth over the years is Over the Edge 1999. Obviously, very tragic what happened to Owen Hart on that event. But what I'm still not sure to this day is why that event continued. I understand that the show sometimes must go on, but at this point, I don't see how the show could have. I mean, Owen died in the ring, and that's something awful. No one wanted it to happen, as of course, it was I'm sure so, an accident, but it was awful, and how the fans must have felt with the show continuing, how the superstars in the back must have felt. No one, I'm sure, wanted to perform. I'm sure the fans was not interested really what was going on for the remainder of that show, and I think for all in all would have been best to have stopped the show there. I mean, for me that has to be for me probably the worst bit of promoting I feel from that point, because I mean, someone's life that passed, and I mean the show continued, so for me that has to be the one. But that's all from us anyway here on Ask SCW this week. Thank you for your questions as always. Make sure to follow everybody as well throughout the wrestling community. Let's grow as one big community together. I appreciate everyone that gets involved with their questions, and look out this week as well. Of course, we've got Slammiversary and Extreme Rules predictions will be on the way for you as well. But thank you very much for everything. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time here on Ask SCW, and please like, share, subscribe, and please share with a friend. Take care.